Hi, this is Phil Carlton, and I'm excited today to show you some of the new features in the mySewnet Embroidery software. The mySewnet Embroidery software is the next generation of software from Husqvarna Viking and FOF following Premiere Plus 2. Now, there are going to be two different ways you can get the mySewnet Embroidery software. The first is going to be through a monthly subscription. One of the great things about the subscription version of the software is it includes the mySewnet library, which you can use with your mySewnet-enabled embroidery machine. That library currently has over 5,500 designs, and they add more every week. If, for example, you have one of the machines that uses our new ribbon attachment, you know it has over 100 designs for that piece of equipment. You can find more information about the pricing and the different levels at mySewnet.com. In 2021, we're also going to see a boxed version of the software, and what I would say is maybe you want to talk to your FOF or Husqvarna Viking dealer to find out which option is the best for you. Now today I'll be working in the platinum level of the mySewnet Embroidery software, and just so you kind of understand, that's going to be comparable to the Ultra version of Premiere Plus 2. This is the first screen you're going to see when you run mySewnet Embroidery. Now, there are a couple of things you're going to notice that are different from Premiere Plus 2. Over here in kind of this area, we're going to see a new project where we can begin many of our common functions. I can start with a blank canvas, I can start with a photo stitch, an express monogram. If I scroll down here, I'll find an option to do a cross-stitch design or digitizing. So one of the things I've heard for years and years about people who have used our software is there are so many modules, it's confusing to know where to go to do different functions. And one of the things I really like about the mySewnet software is our developers really looked at working on incorporating everything into this one main module, and then we leave this to go do other functions. So let me show you a little about what I'm talking about. So let's just start. I want to show you one other thing before I leave this screen. Here in this area, we do have an open project where I can click open to open an existing VP4 file. So we'll still be using the VP4 in our software. And it's also going to list our most recent files. So as you do work, you'll notice them showing up here so you can quickly access them. I'm going to start by going to a blank canvas to start a new project with no content. And when I do, the first thing it's going to do is give me a dialog to select a hoop size. Now today I'm going to just work in this default size it has set up. It has a check mark here in my enter hoop size with a width of 180. And actually, let's make it a little bit bigger. Let's go to a 240 by 150, just so you can see you can change the hoop. And it's the first thing you do when you come into the software. I like that because as I'm starting a new project, the first thing I usually do anyway is go into my hoop setting and pick the hoop I'm going to need. So now it's just part of our process. I'm going to go ahead and click OK and point out a couple of things you're going to notice right away. If you'll look down in the lower left-hand corner, there is no longer a list of the quick links to get to the other modules. And I'll show a little about how to get to some of them today, and then we'll talk more about them later on. Now I want to take a few minutes to show you some of the new things that have been added to the software. The first thing I want to look at is on the Letter tab. And in mySewnet Embroidery, we've added 29 new fonts, which takes the total up to 245. Now, one of the nice things, if you've been working with a previous version of our software, and maybe you had the embroidery or the extra, you didn't have access to all the fonts. Now you're going to have access to all these fonts if you're using the silver or the platinum version. I'm going to go ahead and scroll in here, and I'm just going to show you a couple of my favorite new fonts, and probably, I'm going to start right here, the most requested thing, because we had cats in Premiere Plus 2, and now we have dogs, and I can't even tell you how many people have asked me over the years, when are we going to get dogs? So here they are. We also have birdies, but I'm just going to show you a couple of these dogs, and I have, on this one you'll see we have an outline version, and we have a colored version. I'm going to come in here to this one that's done with fills, and I'm going to type in the first four letters of my dog's name, Theodore, and click apply. And there you go. And I think those are just adorable. Let's get rid of those, and I'm going to scroll down. There were a couple of other fonts I really liked, so I'm going to scroll on through here and find them. And let me see which one really jumped. I really liked this whimsy a lot. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to type in, I'll type the word love in all caps. And I'm going to do this one at about 80 millimeters just because I think it's a nifty little font. I made it a little too large for my hoop, but I really like this kind of fun look of this font, I've got to say. So I'm going to delete that one, and I do want to come down, and I think there was one other one I just wanted to point out here. Let me see if I can find it here. And oh yeah, this is it. It was Zephyros is I think how this one is said. And I thought it was just a really pretty satin column font. And so I will type in my name for lack of anything else too exciting. And I'm going to bring this in at about 3 inches. Now one thing you probably know, but in case you don't remember, most of the time when we're working with our lettering, we're going to see that it's listing the size that it's recommended in millimeters. This one's recommended between 55 and 80 millimeters. And that's going to be between about 2 and 3 inches. If you remember, 25 millimeters to an inch. But if I want this letter to be 3 inches tall, I can just type in 3 and my quote mark, and when I hit the tab key, it's converted it to 76 millimeters. Then I can click apply. Very nice. So I really like the look of that font. I think it's a really nice look. Now, on top of that, I do want to point out a couple of other things that were added. So we talked a little about the fonts with 29 new ones. And I want to go over to the Frame tab for a second. So the first thing you may notice is we have a Frame tab, which we had in Premiere Plus 2, and we do not have a Border tab anymore. So the frames and borders, which are kind of in the same family, have all been added to one tab now. And if I look at the category here on the left side, I'll notice that I have my frames, my corner pieces, my side pieces, or my flourish, I think those are called side pieces, yes. My flourishes. And if I want to do a border, I can select my border, and now my border tools are right here. And then the little star with an underline is my motif underline. Click that, and the motif underline, you may remember, will let me bring in a series of our decorative stitches, our motifs. For this one, I want to look and show you just a couple of the new frames that have been added. So I'm going to select my category frame. Click on my drop-down to look at all of our different frames, and I will point out that there are 63 new frames and flourishes, so we now have 657 built into our software between the frames and the flourishes. I'm going to come down here, and the ones that I really like this contemporary set, and I'll show you one of those in just a moment. But I did also want to point out we have some new really pretty floral multicolored. And if I come down a little bit further, I think yes. And then under ornamental, we now have several more frames that are in more than one color. But I'm going to go back. I really liked, where did that go? It ran off and I lost it. There they are, Contemporary 3. I forgot about that for just a second. I'm going to select this oval-shaped one. Sorry about that. And I'm just going to, with my lettering selected, click Apply. And there we go. Really nice looking frame. Now, notice it's just a little bit larger than my hoop. I'm not going to worry about that for today. I would probably need to make my lettering. In fact, we can make it just a little bit smaller. One of the things we can think about is this frame was built in our software, and the lettering was built in this software. And this is probably a good time to talk about what we have over here on the left side, which is a film strip now, which has been added. And I'm so excited. It makes working with multiple objects here in embroidery so much easier. So I'm going to go to the Home tab, and right now we can see these orange handles are telling me these objects are grouped. I'm going to come up here and click Ungroup, and now I can see in my film strip I have two separate objects. If we look here, the first one is telling me that it is something that was created here in the software, digitized in the software, and I can see the green handles for that. And if I select the lettering, I can see the little letter A in the film strip. And again, we've got green handles, which tells me it's something that was created here in embroidery. And anytime we see those green handles, I know I can resize these objects without hurting them. So I'm going to just make this a little bit smaller. I'm holding down my Shift and Control to keep it kind of in proportion and centered. Then I'm going to select that frame and make it just a little bit smaller too, the same way. Now, this is where this comes in really nicely, because I'm looking here at my frame and I'm looking at my lettering, and sometimes it can be hard to select lettering if it's got a frame around it, but now I can just come over to my film strip, click on it, and there we go. And then I could right-click and make changes, or maybe I want to come in here, double-click in my colors, and I want to just change it to a nice red. So I love having that film strip here. It's been a really great addition, and I know you're going to enjoy working with it. The other new thing I want to point out before we go to the next section is if I go over to Super Designs, we've added 477 new Super Designs in 53 new sets. I've got my categories set to all. And I'm just going to scroll through these really quick and point out a few of them that I've really enjoyed. So we've got some really cute animals that have been added here. If I come down a little bit further, we have 3 rows of animal silhouettes that I think could do some really nifty things. I'm going to come on down, and I'm going to show you my favorite. There are two categories I want to show you, though. So here under, I lost it. Let me come down here under retro cartoons. I really love the look of these. So this is probably one of my favorites right here. And you'll notice also here on the side with many of our super designs, we have multiple options. So if I click on Select Style, I have a color version of this, and then I have a line art version of that. So maybe I want to bring in the line art version of this fella right here. I'm going to select him. And with our super designs, we can tell them how large, or tell the software how large we want it to be. I want this one to be 4 inches tall. I'm going to type in 100 millimeters and click Apply. And there he is. I can select him, move him around. So I'm really kind of enjoying that. I think they're a really fun set. I'm going to come to the Home tab for just a moment, click Select All, and click my trash can to delete. And now I'm back to a blank canvas, and I want to show you one other set of super designs. So as I drop down here, I'm going to come down toward the bottom, and we have all these right here, which are geometric 1, geometric 2, 3, and modular 1 and 2, and ornamental. But you'll notice they all have the word Encore after them, and these are designs that are specifically created to work really nicely in our Encore function. So I really liked this one earlier. So I'm going to grab this little twist right here, and I'm going to tell it I want this to be, I'm going to make it 30 millimeters tall, and click Apply. Then let me go over to Encore, and I'm going to tell it I want to do an Encore, and let's do 8 repeats and see what happens. A little too large for a hoop, so maybe I'll take it down to 6 repeats. And let's kind of pull them down until they meet and click Apply. So those shapes that are built in, so all the new super designs that are built to work with Encore are going to give you some really nice patterns. I'm going to select that. I'm just going to click Delete on my keyboard this time. The next tab that's changed is Embellish. And you may remember in the past we had a tab called Decoration, and we could use it to add crystals. But now we have a new section here called Add Ribbon. So if you have the ribbon embroidery attachment that will let you do some really cool ribbon designs, you can now create your own. And you can do that by just drawing the shape. I'm going to just show that I can come in here and select one of my shapes. And let's see, I actually like this brand new frame. So we used to only have 75 shapes, and now I believe we have 120 shapes built in. I'm going to select this frame and just click Draw Shape. I'm going to pick a color, so I want to do this maybe in a purple ribbon, and I'm going to use a 7 millimeter ribbon, see what this looks like. Click OK. Now notice if you've used that attachment, you know you can't use the entire hoop area, so this green area is going to show me the safe area for my ribbon attachment. I'm just going to leave this where it is for today, so I'm going to right click and finish placing shape. And there we have now the design, and if I sent it to my machine, it would use that attachment to lay down this ribbon. Really easy and fun to use. You're going to enjoy that. The next tab I want to talk about is the Create tab. So I'm going to come across here to Create, and you'll notice we have 3 different sections here. So we did have a tab in the previous version called Wizards, and you'll notice all of our wizards are now here on the Create tab, because this is where we're coming to create something or make something, whether it's a monogram, a photo stitch, a word sculpt, or even one of our new Spyros. Then I do want to point out 2 other things that have been added here. So we have our digitizing module. And that is now called digitizing. In the previous version, it was called Create, but it's easier. I like that it's called digitizing because that's what it does. So if I clicked that, it would just launch digitizing. I could digitize something, and when I closed it, it would be back here in my embroidery module. And then under Open, I can run my cross-stitcher or my sketch from right up here. There are 2 final things I want to show you today. I want to start with the project in the hoop. So if I click on Project in the Hoop, you're going to see there are several new categories added. We have a category of Christmas ornaments that has some really nifty, I really like this little tree a lot. And these are going to be stuffed ornaments that you create in the hoop. Then we have, I'll come back to that one in a second. I want to point out that we have some pencil cases that have some really nifty effects, and our digitizer did a really nice job creating some of these pieces. We have some in the hoop pouches or zipper bags, and I really like the style of these. So notice this one looks like a camera. We have one that looks like a floppy disk, which appeals to the nerd from the 80s in me, so I love that one. We have a rainbow one, a really nice sewing machine bag, and I even like this vintage sewing machine. Kind of a nifty look. And then there are also several blanks of each of the different sizes, so you can customize and create your own in the hoop bags. And then I want to lastly look at the category coasters. And you notice there are a whole bunch of different in the hoop coasters done. And I want to look at, well, I want to show you a couple of different ones. So I'm just going to kind of move through these for a moment. So you can see they have some really nice geometric designs. But then I'm going to bring in, I think I'm just going to bring in, let me look at, I think the hexagon blanked. So I'm going to select that one and click OK. And it's going to insert this coaster into my work area. And notice, if you will, it came in as a group, so it has multiple objects. So I'm going to again come over to the Home tab, and I'm going to ungroup this today. And now I see I have two different objects. I have the first piece, which is the top piece in the applique, and the second piece is actually the bean stitch that's going to hold down the backing fabric. So these are designed to work with something like maybe a cork that you're fixing on the back after you've done all your embroidery. Now on this one I do want to add a monogram, so I'm going to show you one other font. So I'm going to go to my letter tab, go to my drop down, and I know this was down toward the end that I liked this font. Let me find it right here. Rosemary 2C 45 to 120. So 45 to 120 is the range. 2C tells me that it is a two-color font. I'm going to select this, and I'm noticing that my coaster, if I look over on the side, is about 95 millimeters tall. So I'm going to make this letter, I'm going to do just the letter, I'll do a letter P, why not? I'm going to bring it in at about, let's do it at 70 millimeters. Click the green check mark to apply, and then I just need to move it into position. And just like that, I've made a really nice custom coaster. Now, the one thing I want to change is, remember I said the second step is the tack down that's going to hold down that cork or the fabric that I put on the back of my coaster. I want my letter to embroider before that happens, so in my film strip, I just drag it into place. And now that's telling me the order that those are going to stitch in. I love that film strip so very much. And the last thing I want to show you is over on the Create tab, the Spyro Wizard. I'm going to go ahead and click on Spyro. It's going to launch this wizard for me. And in the upper left-hand corner, I can tell it how large I want my Spyro to be. So I'm going to do 120 millimeters for this one, which is going to be a little under 5 inches. And then I want to look at these sliders over here. So I can change the color if I want to. I'm going to leave it just at this default color. This percentage tells it how large I want to be inside my work area. So if I have it set to 120 and 100%, it's going to be the full height of 120 millimeters. The next one is going to be the number of petals. Now, this has, if you were to count and go around, it's got 12 different petals. So that actually might be fun for creating a clock or something like that. Without changing that for a second, I want to look at the petal type. So the petal type is going to change as you move through and change your numbers. And the best thing to do here is I found that I just start playing with this slider. And depending on how many petals I have, I'm going to get some different effects. Now, I like this one for today, so I'm going to stick with that for a second. This one, my curvature, if I run it lower, it's going to take more of the curve to the outside. And so really it's amazing. And some of the nicest things that I've gotten out of this have been just by doing random settings and playing to see what happens. So I'm going to do that one, I think, right there. I kind of like that for a second. I'm going to show you why, because I want to add one more Spyro. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a color. And on this one, I'm going to tell it I want this one to be, let's do this in a purple. Actually, let's do this in orange so it really stands out. Now, right now, it's right on top of it, but that's where this percentage slider comes in, because if I come in here and tell it I want this one to be smaller, maybe I want that one to fit inside my first one, and maybe I want its setting to be a little bit different. I think I want more petals than that, and maybe a little more curvature. So that one's getting pretty close. I kind of like what happened there. Now I do notice that I'm getting a little bit of a sharp edge here. So I do have a couple of other things I can change. Down here in the lower left-hand corner, I do have a stitch option where I can tell it whether I want it to be a running stitch, a double stitch, or a triple stitch. And most of these that I've stitched out, I've done add a triple stitch. Now I could take my stitch length down just a little bit, but I'm also going to remind you that we are looking at, this whole thing is only 5 inches, so this middle one is probably only about 2.5 inches tall. So when this stitches out, it's not going to look nearly as blocky as it does here when we're looking at it on the computer screen. I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and that actually gave me a little more curve on those. And if I click OK, now I've created those two Spyros kind of embedded. I want to go back into Spyro for a minute, and I'm going to just do a reset. And I want to talk about one other piece here. So I'm going to just pick a couple of random settings here. I'm not going to think too much about what I'm creating here. Oh, actually, I kind of like that one. Let me see. Well, I'll do that. So I want to talk about the bottom section for a second. So this has one design in it right now, one color, one Spyro. And the bottom section here will create copies of that Spyro. So I'm going to tell it I want to have 4 copies of this one. And then I have a setting that will either make the spacing smaller or the rotation, or I can change the rotation. So notice this got really, really complex, but gives me some really nifty intersections. And maybe I just want 3 repeats of that. I kind of like that. Or maybe I want to stay with 5 repeats of it, but instead of changing the curvature spacing, I'm going to take that to 0, and I'm going to have it rotate each one by maybe 5 degrees. So you can get some really striking results when you start creating a Spyro that you like up here, and then playing with the number of repeats and the rotation, or even the sizing on top of that, to get some really cool effects. I'm back in the Spyro one last time, and I'm just going to play with a few different settings because I want to show you one other part of our new software. In my stitch options, I do want to do a triple stitch, and I'm going to take that stitch length up to about a 2.5 and click OK. Now I do want to show you that if this stitches out, it will indeed stitch out like a Spyro. It's going to stitch without any jumps, so I'll just speed that up a little bit. So they stitch out really nicely, really quickly. And I want to talk about one other module that we use a lot that we haven't gotten to yet, and that is Stitch Editor. It's what we used to call Stitch Editor, and then it became Modify, and now we're calling it Stitch Editor again because that's what it does. And if you'll notice, when I have this design selected, after I've used my Spyro Wizard, it has white handles, so it's created this Spyro design as just a stitch file. Now, if I wanted to recreate it later, I could come over and look at my settings, and my settings are going to give me all the details I used to create that Spyro. But I want to take this over to Stitch Editor and make a little change. So I'm just going to click on Edit. And when I do, it's going to pop open the Stitch Editor module, take a second, put my design in it, and I'm ready to work with it. So for this one, I'm going to go to my Modify tab. I'm going to do Global Morphing, and I'm going to choose, I really like doing a little bit of a twirl on these. I'm just giving them just a little bit of twist to it. And then when I'm happy with it, I can just close my Stitch Editor. And notice it took me back over into embroidery now, and it's made that change for me. So again, I didn't have to save this, open up another module, open the design, make the change, save my stitch file, come back to embroidery, and open it up. It's all right here with that edit button. So much easier and such a nice workflow. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope you enjoyed this first look at the mySewnet Embroidery software. Remember, if you have questions, you can find me over on Facebook. And you can also talk to your dealer, and they'll have more information about the pricing and the new software. Thank you very much.